Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Safety Systems. If you're planning a getaway this summer, folks, make sure you feel your home is safe and secure while you are away. Call VFL JJ Surlis and the team at Safety Systems to get a top-notch security system, one where you can just sit there wherever you are. You're sitting on the beach, you check out your smartphone, click on the buttons, and boom, you can actually see your house. You get the cameras turned on and everything, locked doors, open doors. If a mailman's got a package, boom, open it, walks in. It's perfect. Safety Systems, safetysystems.com. Check them out this week. All right, now check this out right now. This is one of my radar graphs. For those of you who hate this kind of stuff, bear with me. It's very simple. On the left was 2021. That's why it says 2021. And on the right is 2022. There are 12 categories there, offensive stats. And what you need to look at, the more orange, the better. So in 2021, Tennessee didn't lead the SEC. This is all in relation 1 through 14 with the SEC. Tennessee didn't lead the SEC in any of those categories because they're still white around the edges. You want to be as far out to the edge as you can. In 2022, they jumped and led 6 different categories in the SEC. Pass yards per game, total offensive yards per game, pass plays of over 30 yards, red zone TD percentage, giveaways. They were the best at protecting the football. Points per game. As a matter of fact, they got better in tackles for loss allowed, sacks allowed. The only place they really got worse was rushing yards per game last year. And as we discussed here in break, you can kind of chalk that up to the fact that their passing yards per game went through the roof. That may flip-flop this year. We'll see. But when of these stats, of these areas, tackles for loss, sacks, that kind of thing, I look at the offensive line. And we got into it there in that last segment. We continued to dig into it. But Darnell Wright, man, he shot himself up the draft boards.
Yes.
I saw something this week that had him in the top 10. And then you're also losing Jerome Carvin. You're bringing the kid from Miami. That's fine. But to me, that is the place where I would have concerns. And you say that already in the spring, that may be one place where you're trying to focus on. All right, it doesn't look as smooth yet as some of the other spots. Do you guys, are we all in agreement here? I know you think receivers are a concern and quarterback, certainly quarterback. I still think offensive line's the bigger issue here for me.
I'll tell you, I honestly think that I said receivers a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about this, and I will now change my answer. It is the offensive line. Because your offensive line, when you look back at it, it was, you don't really notice offensive lines unless they're screwing up.
Yeah.
Unless something's going bad, you don't notice it. And last year, you didn't really notice how good Tennessee's offensive line was most of the time. So I'm going to change my answer. I'm going from receivers over to offensive line.
Well, Jimmy pointed out last year that this system helps cover the offensive line a little bit as well.
Mm-hmm. But I think, if you really look at the offensive line too, Alabama, you had guys to stop Will Anderson, to people like that, right? Yeah. You win that game. Georgia, you weren't as good on the inside at that point in the season, and so their main man gets you, and that game doesn't go as well. So I think saying offensive line is key. Also, John, you've shown several times how this team rushes is actually how they're going to win. So those rush yards of what they're averaging there makes the average, or not average, but not as great wide receiver, opens up bigger lanes for them, so it can solve some of your problems. So offensive line to me would clearly be your place. It's also the hardest place to go get a freshman or replace. If you don't have it, it's not like you're going to have it. You've got to have it there and ready to go. Otherwise, you're saying, what are we going to do next year?
The other thing that's interesting that factors into this, now we talked about it last week that Joe Milton has lost some weight trying to be more mobile in the pocket. He is not as elusive or smooth or fluid in the pocket as Hendon Hooker was.
Right.
So that's another concern for your offensive line.
Yeah.
Where did Hendon Hooker help cover it up with the offensive line that Joe Milton, and will Joe Milton be able to do it the same way?
Yeah, that was one of the things I was going to bring up. I thought Hooker's pocket presence was really good. And I think he alluded a number of times when he potentially could have been sacked. I don't know if Milton's going to bring that. The other part of that with the rushing yards, Hooker was a willing runner. I think Milton has the ability to run, but he doesn't look like he wants to take off and run the way Hooker did. And Milton's fast. He's big, but he's not as daring with the football running it as Hooker was. So I'll be curious to see how that plays out, but I don't know if he is going to be as good in escaping the pass rush as Hooker was, which could lead to you getting more sacks.
How do we feel about the running backs? I mean, right now you've got one guy's out with the surgery he had, so you're kind of relying on the freshman you brought in, local kid, who got praise from Josh Heupel yesterday. Is there any concern, though, about not having enough depth at running back? We went in last year saying, I don't know if they've got enough depth, and they made it through the season with basically 3 guys, which is pretty impressive. I don't know if you can pull that off again. Do we feel good about the running back depth?
I think they're okay there. You're not seeing Jabari Small out there this spring. That makes a difference, obviously. And Jalen Wright, you don't want to lean too heavily on him in the spring, but he was your leading rusher this past season. So I think they'll still be fine. It'll look like mostly the same group, but you bring in a couple young guys that can help too. Cameron Seldon could be a factor there. So Khalifa Keith not here yet. Also, He'll be here after the spring. So I think they're okay depth-wise. It kind of goes back to the offensive line. Can they open holes for those guys? They're going to miss Jerome Carvin maybe as much as Darnell Wright or even more. Carvin was kind of the unsung hero to me at that offensive line playing inside.
I think they'll be okay with their depth, but I think one of the freshmen, maybe it is Seldon, needs to help because Jabari Small's going to get hurt, right?
He always does.
So we've seen the history of that. But I do like the other 2 running backs behind him, but it would be nice if one of the freshmen steps up.
I'll let you close it out. Anything to finish with?
Also, I think, Fant is the guy that you're going to miss. It was kind of a hard matchup. You didn't necessarily get all the production out of him, but if I'm a defensive coordinator and I went into a game, I go, guys, we got to be planning for this guy. We have to think about him. And it caused issues for linebackers that you don't see once he's out, right? You don't have that guy where it's multiple use. So even though you may only do it twice a game, I'm having to think about it. Is this the play it's going to happen? And so that can also present some
That's
issues.
a great point.
Overall, quickly, Tennessee's success on offense, I think, is going to come down to how well these transfers get acclimated because McCallum Castles can be an answer at tight end. Now, he can't replace the goal line work that Princeton Fant did as a runner, but those offensive linemen have to be good on the offense as transfers. And Dante Thornton, to me, has to be a star wide receiver if they're going to have the kind of offense or even close to what they had last year.
All right. Ryan, Will, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate it. Bob, hang on. You'll be back in a second. Jimmy, sit right there, and we're going to bring out your longtime partner, John Wilkerson, is going to join us next. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit over these last 30 minutes about the end of a radio era that 25 years, folks, you're not going to see that come around. That just doesn't happen in this industry. So we'll talk about that when we come back here on The Sports Source.